Hey guys, coming at you with a video on the story of this engine, what all is in it, as well as the cost of putting it together. Starting out with the basics, this is a 355 small block Chevy that was in a 1976 Nova that I had bought. I bought it, and then a couple days later, it started burning oil like crazy. Uh, Crazy, like it was like straight mosquito fogging. Like all the plugs were caked in uh, oil gunk when I took them out. This thing was throwing up smoke screens like it was World War II. And I went to check the oil after I finally noticed it, and at first I was like, oh, I don't really care. I just smell it. But then you see it, and I'm like, okay, now I care. And I got it home. I drove it home one day when I said enough is enough, and I checked the oil, and it was completely empty. It didn't run bone dry on oil, but it just wasn't on the dipstick. I wasn't, it wasn't like it was knocking or anything, or even like taking like the lifters were bone dry. So I definitely didn't super badly hurt the engine, thankfully. Um, Basically, I ended up pulling this out, and I put another 355 into that car, which actually, if you go back a few videos, back last winter, um, when I had this car all apart, separated the body from the frame, I showed you guys the 355 that I had bought for this car. That engine ended up going in that Nova. That Nova got sold. And then for a while, I was like moseying around, like, oh my God, I don't have a drivetrain for it, or I don't have an engine for this car anymore. What am I going to do? Then I remembered, oh yeah, I got that whooped 355 sitting in that corner over there on an engine stand. And I want to say around October, November last year, I decided, well, let's rebuild it, pull it apart. Um, Actually, I think I decided to do that around August of this past year, and I finally got to doing it in October and November. But anyway, that doesn't matter. um, so for this engine specifically, like I said, it's a 355 small block Chevy. It used to be a 350 4 barrel 4 bolt main truck block out of a 1971-72 Chevy truck. So it is a 4 bolt main, 2 piece rear main seal. Unfortunately, about the rear main seal, they're a little more prone to leaking, a lot more prone to leaking actually. But I'm not too worried about that. And when I had got it, it had a camshaft in it already. Obviously, it's 355. It's gonna have a camshaft. It came with these double hump heads on it, and it when I had it in my Nova, it was pretty ballsy. It had a lot of torque to it. It had a lot of get up and go. So that's why I was like, all right, well, let's rebuild it and put it into this thing. Because I was going to go with basically almost the same engine. Just because, like, the other engine I had was a 355 with camel hump heads. And it had a. What did it have in it? It was not a comp cam. It was a Lunati cam. Yeah, it was a Lunati Voodoo cam, I think. That was a 268 lift, or 268 duration cam. Um, I believe it was 268. Not sure. Anyway, so I ended up taking this engine apart. I found nothing inherently terribly wrong with the block. The cylinder walls all still had cross hatching on them a little bit. It was definitely not freshly rebuilt, but they still had cross hatching on the cylinder walls, and it just looked like the piston rings went or something. I don't know. But it was definitely burning oil. It was burning oil in just about all of the cylinders. They all had carbon in them. I don't know that that's exactly for sure the piston rings, but That's another reason why I'm anxious about this block is, I have no idea if it really was the piston rings. But anyway, so I did end up replacing the crankshaft with a Summit Racing crankshaft because the crankshaft that was in it had a little bit of scratching on it. I could catch it with my fingernail. And I figured, what's the point in sending that crankshaft out to get polished when I could just buy a $200 Summit crankshaft? I might learn my lesson as to why soon, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We'll cross that bridge when the cam snaps in half or something. I don't know. But I put a Comp Cam's Extreme Energy cam in it. Previous videos, I couldn't remember what it was. It's an Extreme Energy hydraulic flat tappet cam. The part number is K12-238-2. It's a 262 intake duration, 270 exhaust duration, 462 intake lift, 469 exhaust lift, and 110 lobe separation angle. So it's around the same as the other cam I had. And, like I said, from what I've heard on videos on YouTube of this cam and a small block Chevy, they sound pretty damn good. It's got double hump cast iron heads, obviously. There's nothing special about them. They're not ported or polished or anything. It has a stock Summit Racing crank, 3.48 inch stroke, flat top 4 valve relief aluminum pistons, stock connecting rods, Summit stock steel rocker arms, Headman hot rods, 1.5 inch outer diameter mid length headers, Chinese HEI distributor. Don't know if it's going to work. I don't know how well it's going to time. I'm not too convinced that that's going to be a good distributor. If that fails, I'll probably jump up to something better, like a name brand. But I just bought that for the sake of affordability and because I just want to hear this thing run. It has an Edelbrock Performer EPS, I believe. Yeah, Edelbrock Performer EPS. Square bore aluminum intake. Just a little cheapo aluminum intake. And a Holley 650 double pumper. That's pretty much all the performance stuff for this engine. Otherwise, there's our stuff like it's got a high volume oil pump, Wyand 7-quart baffled oil pan, chromoly heat treated push rods, Summit aluminum water pump, ARP cylinder head bolts, Summit harmonic balancer, and these real nice thick cast aluminum valve covers, and All-Star Performance breather with a breather sock on it. But yeah, I mean, that's all like very, very like nitpicky stuff. It's not really anything special. As far as the cost goes, I have a couple freebies that I got from my older brother. He was nice enough to give me that Holley carburetor, which normally would be $725. At least, from what I checked on the Summit website. I don't know if that's how much it cost when he bought it, but so that's a very, very nice save there. And he also gave me that Holley throttle cable linkage or throttle linkage, whatever you want to call it, the return spring setup, as well as the performer intake. So the cost for everything, I added up all my receipts, and the cost with shipping for everything was $2,274.06. And obviously keep in mind, I didn't pay to have the block machined. I didn't send the block out to a professional shop. I did it all myself. And I didn't have the heads or block surfaced or anything. I didn't have the heads gone through. I just replaced the valve stem seals in the heads. And made sure the valve seats were good and sealing, and they are, luckily. So that's the value, that's the cost of everything that I bought to put it together. And if I added the freebies that I got to that, obviously, I don't know the value of those for shipping, but the value, just like the base value, would be make the total out to $3,194.50. So pretty much another grand in freebies, which I very much appreciate. So as far as how that compares to like a crate motor, I believe, I'm not entirely sure, I haven't checked in a while, but I believe like a 355 crate motor, you know, assembled to this degree minus the headers and some other little stuff, I believe that would be or in the $5,000 range, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower. I'm not really sure, but I believe it would be 5 grand ish. So, I pretty much saved at least $1,500 to $2,000 at least. Building this myself without out of stuff that I've already have or got. So that's a very nice save for me. Very satisfied with the progress on this. I want to say it wasn't too terribly difficult to rebuild this engine. I've rebuilt an engine before. That engine didn't last, so like I said, we'll see how this one goes. I had rebuilt the 4-cylinder that was in this Jeep originally, and because I think it had low compression and it had a decent amount of blow by, I ended up taking it apart, and all 4 of the upper piston rings were broken in half. So I think, I was right to assume that it had low compression. So I ended up rebuilding it, kind of. It was a lot more half-assed than this was. Sorry. With that engine, I tore it down, but I left the camshaft in, and then I just replaced the main bearings, the rod bearings, and the piston rings. And, obviously all the stuff to put the head back on. I didn't do the valve seals. I didn't do a cam. I didn't do rockers. Literally just like bare bones shit that you would have to do to replace the piston rings plus the main bearings and crank bearings. Or main bearings and connecting rod bearings. And that engine ended up blowing oil. Again, it had excessive blow by. And in that engine, I didn't hone the cylinders even. It was really slapped together. But this engine, I was a lot more careful. I honed the cylinders a little bit. I took my time knowing what to do to put it back together, torque sequences, everything like that. I think the only thing I didn't really check was like the really nitty gritty stuff like crank and play. And I didn't put like plasti gauge in the bearings to check the thickness, but I didn't, I don't think I really had a reason to. There was no markings on the block to say that the journals were overboard, and that's a brand new crankshaft with stock size journals. So I didn't have any major reason, but obviously it would have been smarter to do that. So that was pretty much the only way that I half-assed this engine rebuild. I replaced all the freeze plugs. I replaced the cam bearings, because that was the other thing, was the cam bearings in this thing were pretty much toast. So I ended up replacing all the cam bearings. And yeah, like I said, the only thing I half-assed was the plastic gauge and the crank end play. And if we wanted to be really anal about it, I probably should have sent this out to a shop to get machined and cleaned, but I didn't, because I don't have that money. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. That's all that you guys need to know about this engine, how much it cost me. Hopefully it gives you guys somewhat of an idea of how much it would cost you to do something similar. Obviously if you're sending it to a machine shop, it's going to be more expensive. And if you're buying aluminum cylinder heads, it's going to be more expensive. But this is a good base figure, at least for a engine rebuild with some little extra goodies in there. So yeah, I I will see you guys in the next video. See ya.